I would like to welcome the audience today in the name of our new committee, which is called Self-Determined Austria. This committee has been constituted some months ago just to promote a left sovereignist agenda in Austria, because it's very difficult nowadays in Austria to formulate and promote that in our medias, in our political landscape. And that's our task, to promote this left sovereignist agenda, to promote Austrian neutrality, self-determined foreign policy, criticism against European Union policy, neoliberalism, and also, of course, against the policy of this new neoliberal Austrian government. This committee consists of traditional socialists, traditional communists, and old school social democrats, individuals, and also some intellectuals. I would say I am not an intellectual, but maybe I will be one. Therefore, we want to connect also with comrades from abroad, like you, to exchange our point of views, our experiences in the political struggle, and also the main important questions: why the left is in the crisis, and what are the most important tasks nowadays of the so-called left movement. Is there a left movement? Is there still existing a left movement nowadays? Which are the rifts within this left movement between liberals, left-wing liberals, and traditional leftists? And therefore you wrote your new book, and therefore I think it's a good possibility also to promote your book. And you told me it's not finished, so when it's finished, then we will also promote the book in Austria when it's printed in English. And just to introduce Lubos Blaha is member of parliament in Slovak parliament for the Smer party, the Social Democratic Party. He's writer, philosoph, and also he teaches on the university in Trnava. Yeah. And he's working on several tasks about the globalization, the globalism, and the left nowadays. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dave. So, dear comrades, I'm very glad that I can be here to speak about my ideas, about my book, about my political positions, and I am very grateful to Dave that he invited me to Vienna, and I hope that really I will have the opportunity to take with me my book in English. It will be probably in a few months, in the end of this year, when it will be published in English. It's translated now in Slovak language. It will be published in 1 month. I really hope that it will provoke some discussion in Slovakia, like I would say my book. My book before, which was really provocative, was titled Back to Marx. So you can imagine that if in the post-communistic society saying back to Marx, you are just blamed that you are Stalinist, Bolshevik, and Marxist, and so on. I am Marxist, I have no problem with this, but I am really not a Bolshevik or Stalinist. Well, Slovakia. Probably I will start with this, with the current situation. I will speak very slowly or very shortly about this. Probably you are interested in this situation, but I will follow with my promotion of the book and my ideas in globalization. Well, the Slovakia has now we have the political crisis because the murder of this young couple in one small village in Slovakia. This murder is very, very terrible, especially because it was the murder of the journalist who was writing the article about Italian mafia, organizing some business in the eastern part of Slovakia. And because of this, there is a big turmoil in politics in Slovakia, because the political opposition in parliament is blaming the government for misbehavior, but also with some connections to everything. There are some conspiracy theories about this. In the end, there is, I think, there are some intelligence game, you know, really to break up this government and to make the instability in Slovakia. Some embassies are very, very active in all the countries in the world in these activities. So I think Slovakia is not the exception, and we need to live with this and I hope that it will be okay. Now I have the fresh information that the coalition is going to continue because there was a problem with the minor coalition partner, the right-wing party, a Hungarian one, but probably it will stay in the coalition, so probably it will continue. This is the situation. If you have some questions about this, we can speak also about this, but I think this is not so important as the globalization. And my main thesis in my book, Anti-Globalist, and probably the title is very, very explicit. I am the anti-globalist, not the ultra-globalist, not the globalist like many, many left-wing liberals in the West. I am anti-globalist, but I am still very, very radical left. And I'm trying to explain my position in maybe 450 pages in my book, from the economical point of view, from the philosophical, political point of view, and I will try to introduce my views very shortly here. My first aim of my book is to counter or to criticize the neoliberal globalization from the economical point of view, and to show how the neoliberalization is the artificial process, historical process which started somewhere in the 70s of 20th century. I'm trying to expose how the multinationals were financing some think tanks based on the ideology of neoliberalism, on Friedrich von Hayek, you know it, he's from Austria, and Milton Friedman and others, and continuing to spread the idea of deregulation, privatization, and liberalization. And this was very, very dangerous, but it was possible at the time, also thanks to some historical events, to spread this idea and to open the rather Keynesian Bretton Woods system of social compromise. And this was done especially by the three very powerful countries in the 70s and especially in the beginning of the 80s. First of all, it was America with Ronald Reagan, but before with Richard Nixon, who completely destroyed this Bretton Woods system. Then it was Great Britain. Both these countries were very much involved in the interest of these financial centers in New York and in London, city of London. And the sad thing is that in Great Britain, it was firstly the Labour government which started to do these bad things in economic policy. Starting with this austerity politics, we know now from this debt crisis in Greece and in Europe, but it started in the 70s. It was with in the introduction of labor. But the most saddest or frustrating thing for the left-wing movement is that the third country, which was really decisive in this process, was socialist France. And it was under the government of François Mitterrand. It was the year of 1983, when Mitterrand government decided to break its previous social democratic Keynesian politics and start with this neoliberal austerity politics based on this agenda of neoliberals. The man who was behind this, maybe you know it, was Jacques Delors. Jacques Delors was the Ministry of Finance of this government, and then he started to be the president of the European Commission. He started this neoliberal trend also in the European Union. For many left-wing people, he's still the icon, the hero of the social Europe. In reality, he was the main architect of neoliberalism in the European Union. The truth is that in this socialist party in government, in this Mitterrand government, there was a big clash between the old-style socialist, like probably we are today, and this neoliberal, I cannot say it's socialist, but these neoliberals in socialist party, because then you can imagine that in the 90s it was like mainstream to be neoliberal and to be in social democratic party like Tony Blair or Gerhard Schroeder. It are like normal, typical neoliberals, but still in the social democratic parties. So it started in 80s. It was not like, I don't use the words like betrayal or like some moral incompetence, because it is historical. It was historical pressure which make it, because Mitterrand didn't want it. Even the Labour politicians in the 76 in Great Britain didn't want it. It was the pressure, and this pressure is structural. I'm trying to analyze and to explain the history in this structural thinking. It's like sometimes the politicians just doing the things because they are depressed. There is a structural pressure, and in France it was like this. Mitterrand tried to solve the problem of French economy with these typical Keynesian tools. He tried to make the capital controls. The capital controls, and I will speak about this more, is the base for any alter or anti-globalist project. You need capital controls. If you don't have capital controls, you cannot regulate your economy. You cannot have the control over your economy, and then you are just the part of this globalized capitalist economy. You have no chance to do anything. Mitterrand tried to do this, but it was almost impossible in the background of this European community, because all the other countries were very open, were trying to be more and more liberalized, and it was very easy for capital to move, very easy for people who are rich, for the rich or money people, to go to the Swiss banks to make their money there. So it was almost impossible to cut this spreading of this money from the country and this capital from the country. In this situation, and this project was called the Socialism in One Country, but not the same like it was in Stalin's time. This socialism in one country was lasting, I think, 2 years, and after that, people were so frustrated after this media coverage, after this change in the zeitgeist, after this hegemony of neoliberal ideas which was starting, that they just that the Socialist Party were losing its political results, and Mitterrand said, "Okay, Delors, go on." And Delors started with his liberal revolution, and then it started for Europe everywhere, and now we have neoliberal Europe today in the 21st century. So it was some historical decisions which make this breakthrough. Neoliberalism is nothing natural. It's just historical. It's just the interest of some specific groups, especially finance capital, and some multinationals, based especially in the really rich countries and powerful countries like the United States of America, Great Britain, France, or Germany. And these multinationals or transnationals are spreading their interest and their influence over the world economy. And this started in the 70s and 80s. I'm really covering this issue very, very deeply in my book. I will just stop here because I don't want to be unhistorical. So my first aim in my book is to criticize this neoliberal globalization. And the second is to criticize the project of alter globalism in left-wing thinking. And this is, I think, the biggest cleavage in European left movement. Before we have other cleavages like the labor and capital, like typical classical socialist thinking issues. Now we have the big issue, and nobody's talking about this, the big issue of globalization. You have one part of the left-wing movement which is rather anti-globalist. I am one of this movement. And you have the second part of this left-wing movement which is rather alter-globalist. okay, we have also the part which is global, which is liberal, who are liberal globalizers like Emmanuel Macron, but I wouldn't label them left at all. They are just neoliberals. But okay, some people in the West are trying to see themselves like left wing because they are cultural left. They like LGBT and they think that this is the left wing position. Well, liberals. But I'm okay. I'm also talking about these people in my book, but it's just rather funny because they are really liberals, not the left wing. But in the left wing movement, I mean the real left wing movement, there are two dispositions: anti-globalist and alter-globalist. I don't think that this position from the normative point of view or prescriptive point of view are bad. Both of these positions have good values and good, I think, perspective. But I consider this alter-globalist position now in this historical phase, in this historical era, like the project which is dangerous for the socialist thinking and socialist movement. And I will explain why. The first thing is that if you want to control capital in the global economy, you need to have some collective actor. It cannot be controlled by David, by me, or by minorities like LGBT movement or some other minorities of Africans or of other national minorities or women as a minority. These post-materialistic type of minorities are very ineffective in this kind of politics. So every political movement which is based on this partialism, on this individualism, in this liberal case, or this minority thinking in this post-materialistic or postmodern thinking, is very ineffective towards capital. On one side you have very powerful, very rich and very really influential multinational, transnational capital. Imagine some transnational corporation in your country. We have enough in Slovakia doing really bad things. And from the history you have many examples when the working movement or working class movement were able to combat capital. But it must have been based on some collective identity. It was like a trade union movement, it was like strong working class movement of socialist parties, of communist parties, or it was the national state based on the ideology of nation or of state or of common interest of some people living in some country. It was kind of community. And if you are a community, you can really combat capital because there are a lot of people with a lot of common interest, and this is a possible situation in politics. If you are alone, if you are just individual, or if you are just a minority, you cannot combat capital. The best thing for the multinational capitalism or for this global capitalism is to have the rival in this individualistic left liberal movement. If I am capital, I would be so happy for the left liberals. Because they're just talking about, oh, let's be individualistic and protecting the human rights. Beautiful. Okay, I'm the capitalist. I have the financial empire. I can even sponsor some human rights agencies and human rights activists because there is no problem. They are just not threatening me. Or they are talking about the rights of individuals. I need individuals. I need because I can exploit them very easily. What I'm afraid of, if I'm capital, I'm afraid of some collective actors who can really threaten me. So this is my first argument, practical one. I really don't think that with this individualism or with this postmodernism, you can combat or you can fight with multinational capital, which is so strong. You can fight or you can regulate the multinationals only from the base of the national state. This is my big idea I'm trying to defend. Okay, there are some philosophers or some theorists or some sociologists or economists I'm quoting who are talking about this possibility of regions or regional cooperation based on some international cooperation which can be very effective in regulating capital. But all these socialist authors are telling that the European Union is not a good example. because the European Union is not based on this international cooperation, it's based on this supranational ideology which is going to federalize Europe and just to kill the national state. So in the end it will be not effective, because in the end it will be in the hands of technocrats, and the technocrats are never going to be controlled by democratic majority. They are just going to be controlled by interest of the banks and multinationals and other technocratic elites. They are detached from the people. So this is the situation in the European Union. You probably know very well. Technocracy is not and cannot be the socialist ideal. Technocracy is not a democracy, and for us the democracy is the only ideal, and the democracy itself is possible only in the community which has some common interest, common language, and common political game. You just cannot have the democracy in the world. In a sense, this is the argument of Danny Rodrik. He is a very, very famous economist from the United States. He is social democrat, and he is absolutely known like something like nationalist or fascist, like everybody is talking. If you are talking about nation, you must be fascist in today's discourse. He is absolutely open-minded, very liberal man, but he's saying, okay, but ask the working people in the world, whenever in the world, if they feel like a part or are like a member of a global community, or a member like a cosmopolitan man or woman, or they feel like a member of their community, their nation, their other community. It can be tribe, it can be working class, it can be family, it can be something, but still, are you considering yourself as a community-based man or as a part of the global society? He said that in the polls, it was really the polls in this global surveys, only the people from 3 countries were considering themselves like the cosmopolitan, like the global citizens, more than like the national citizens. It was Colombia, because of these drug wars, and nobody's believing the Colombian state. They just feel Colombia is, in fact, it's not the state. It's just the territory of some mafia-based, drug sales. Andorra, very small country where lives only the Spanish and the Catalans. So you can imagine that in this country it's possible. And I think that the third one was Greenland, or some funny state. All the other states, all the other regions are really connected to their membership to some community, to some state. And this is against the survey of many other thinkers I'm quoting in my book. There are from the class analysis, there are only one class which is so much devoted to this ideal of liberal globalism and cosmopolitanism. That, we don't need some nations, we don't need some states, we don't need some state borders. This position is typical for the frequent travelers. And frequent travelers are very concentrated in the middle classes, especially upper middle classes, especially when you are some senior manager or in some corporation which is transnational, or you are artist. This is very typical for artists, journalists, and this kind of people. You sometimes are this type of people or this type of man if you are student, very, very successful student from some city, metropolis city, from London, Paris, maybe Vienna, because this is typical from your background. You don't really need to be part of the nation. You don't need your nation. You have very successful, rich, and your career is based on your traveling and on your flexible identity. One day or 1 month you are working in Saudi Arabia or Dubai, the next year you are working in Japan, then in the United States, then in Argentina. You don't need to be anything from this. But this is the reality for very few people in every nation. This is the reality, very, very influential people. These people are really working in the senior positions, working in the medias, working in the NGOs. But the really bulk of the really majority of other people in every country is based on their territory, because you just can't escape your family, can't escape your home. It's still your living world. And this is the reality, especially for the people who we are trying to represent. I mean the left-wing parties or left-wing people. Well, who are going to be, who we are representing? Middle classes? No, liberals are going to represent as middle classes. I mean the upper middle classes. This is typical. I don't want to be very class-based, but still, also in today's politics, there is a class, and there are the classes. And I think the left-wing parties should defend, especially the lower classes. I mean the people who are just poor or not very rich, people who are workers or employees, and people who are in the position which is very vulnerable. And this is typical in philosophy to say about these people that they are working classes. Today, and this is again one analysis in my book, it's almost like heresy to say working classes, but still they exist. And there are more in the development world, more in the countries like in Africa, in Asia. There are not so much in maybe in Great Britain, Germany or France, but they are still existing and in many numbers. I think that left-wing and socialist parties should represent these people. Then liberals can represent the middle class, and these conservative parties and all these neoliberal parties can represent these bankers and the financial senior managers and so on. The truth is, if you ask working people if they are cosmopolitan or if they are frequent travelers, no, they are not. They're just living in their valleys, in their towns, in their villages. In Slovakia, we have only two bigger cities from the point of view of Slovakia, Bratislava and Košice. Everybody's living in the village, in some little small town. Everybody's, in a sense, communitarian or patriotic or nationalist in a sense, because everybody has some community, some family, some part, some territory he's part or he or she is part of. You can't just blame these people. They want to belong somewhere. Maybe you know from this 19th century, these big poets of romanticism, like a big individual hero, like Lord Byron and so on. You need to be a big individual hero, combating all the opportunities, and this is the situation for a few people in the world. But the rest is really dependent on their surroundings, on their families, on their territory, on their positioning. You cannot just change this. The people are communitarian. This is the big argument of Michael Walzer, of American philosopher. I met him 1 week ago in New York, in Princeton, in New Jersey. It was beautiful discussion with him, and he's a hero for me in many books. And he's communitarian. He was criticizing liberals all his political life, or philosophical life. He's saying, oh, people are not liberal. In their sense, people, or if you are just individual, if you are just considering yourself like individual, and if the state is going to consider people just like the citizens and individuals based on these human rights, and not as a community, you will never have the real social state. You can have just the residual social state, like in America or in some countries, or in the European Union in a sense, because the European Union is exactly this project of individuals, of human rights-based position, this liberal project. But if you want to have real social state, and he is going to expose some historical examples, like it was Jewish communities, or Scandinavian countries, Sweden after the war. It was a very homogeneous, nation-based society, community. And maybe you remember the idea of folkhemmet, people's home of Per Albin Hansson, the first social democratic prime minister, or not the first, but the first who started to talk about the social state in Sweden, or Tage Erlander. This Tage Erlander, he was talking about the homogeneous Swedish society, folkhemmet, like people's home. Everybody who is Swede should help any other Swedes, because we are one big family and we need to help each other. And on this ideology started to have this typical Swedish social state. It wouldn't be possible if the country is like multicultural with many communities, because in the end, and this is the argument of Walzer, in the end, you cannot just base your social cohesion policies just on some doctrines, on some individualistic doctrines, some rational arguments. It must be about emotion, feelings of community, solidarity. And it cannot be just based on some declaration of human rights. It must be based on some feelings of togetherness. And this was the case for really, as I said, Jewish communities, before Scandinavian countries, and all the European nations. And he is showing that in history you have some effort to make some social states in the multicultural societies or these cosmopolitan societies. It was failure. It was failure because these people they didn't feel any togetherness in this cosmopolitan space. They just feel some togetherness or some solidarity for their communities because they created spontaneously in communities. It was just a space for small communities living besides each other. And there was no social state. Or it was the social state on the American basis, like a melting pot and some residual social state, which is rather neoliberal. And you know the America. I don't think that for European nations this is a good idea to be a melting pot without any base for solidarity and communitarian feelings, just individualistic, human rights based debate and discourse. This is the end of the social state in the Europe. This is just start. That's why I think that the European Union is going to be this project which will in the end kill the social state in the European space. But again, coming back to my book, this is my second argument, that alter globalism, which is talking about the global society, cannot be based on the interests of the working class people and cannot save the social state or the socialism, which is the ultimate goal of left-wing thinking. I mean democratic socialism, of course. Well, yes, it is a beautiful dream. I really like the John Lennon songs. I really like all these hippies dreams, like, oh, no borders, no religion, no, everybody will be brother to each other and sister to each other, and we will like each. Yes, and then you will see the reality. Palestinians and Israelis are hating each other for that. Ukrainians and Russians, and Americans and Chinese and Vietnamese, Saudis and Iranians. Everybody is attacking everybody, and this is real. This is the real world. Just dreaming about like one big family, this is nonsense. Everybody knows it. Maybe in 1000th year it will be possible, and I will be happy. No war. Everybody will be one big family. Impossible. So this should be our dream. This should be like this alter globalism. Like, yes, this kind of neoliberal globalism is bad, but we have the better one. This is really. If you are a dreamer, it's beautiful. You can write a lot of songs about this. But in reality, you are a politician. You are a politician. You need to be realistic. You just cannot be in your sky and just dreaming and dreaming. You need to be realistic. What is possible? And I don't think that it is possible to combat multinationals in your space, in your territory, and to protect your citizens if you are just losing the state. Because this is the ideal of alter globalist. We don't need the state. We don't need a nation. We don't need any collective identity like class or others.
Syndicates.
No, it's like, oh, it's Bolshevism. You just need to be yourself. Like, yourself based on your human rights. No duties, only rights. And this is something which is really useful for the multinational capital. So I think that the best friends for the multinationals are social liberals. And left-wingers, so-called left-wingers, who are talking too much about the global society will in the end it will be socialist, they are saying. No, it will not be. It will be totally capitalist society based on the multinationals without any democracy, because without national state you will never have the democracy, without any social redistribution, because without national states you will never have the real extensive social redistribution like it was in Sweden or Austria in the post-war times. It's impossible. You cannot just base it on the individualism, on liberalism. Liberalism is that project. This cannot be the basement for the left-wing thinking. Really cannot. I am a big leftist, but I am the communitarian leftist. I'm Marxist. My visions are based on the history, on the historical analysis. Because you know there are two big streaming in the socialist thinking. One is this utopian or this reformist one, like I have a dream. dream of the classless societies, some utopia of Thomas Morus or Charles Fourier, like people should be more better to each other, more in harmony. So this is my dream. He will create some dream, and then he's trying to make a politics like what to do to create this dream. Usually it's impossible to make it. So he's always frustrated, and every time in politics he's very unsuccessful. This is one way of thinking. The second is this Marxist or this historical materialist way. Let's analyze the historical situation. Yes, we have some values we are trying to postpone, but we know that this is the situation. And for example, if we are in the situation, and we know the situation of, for example, Saudi Arabia, with this cultural background, with its historical attitudes, with all these things which we will analyze, we see that probably the LGBT marriages is not the right thing to, be fan of in Saudi Arabia today. Maybe in 2000 years, yes, I don't know. Probably not today. For liberals, liberal left-wing thinking, he's talking like, oh, but you have the concept of human rights. And human rights is for everybody. Or for you, but also for the Saudi women, for Saudi homosexual. Let's fight for Saudi homosexuals. Let's give them the marriages, why not? Because they are the part of the humankind. And in the end, they're just fools. Because they will come to the Saudi Arabia, they'll be just killed. Well, I'm just trying to be realistic. Marxists were always realistic. Now I'm coming to my analysis in my book, which is based on these philosophers, big philosophers of Marxism. Because there is now, we were talking about this, I think in the last 2 decades, there is a fashion to say that in the left-wing thinking always was internationalist. This is true, I will explain. So how can you talk about nation and national identity and the community, how you are so betrayal of the left? This is ridiculous. Let's read Marx, let's read Lenin, let's read all these big icons of the left-wing thinking. And I will speak about also with this modern Marxism, modern socialist. Not only Marxism, I'm talking also about Marxism, but also about social democracy. Marx. Karl Marx, I wrote some few books about him, so I really know his writings. His big sentence and big quotation, which is really much overused by this new left. The proletarians doesn't have any, in English, how to say, fatherland. No fatherland. If you read this, the sentence in the context of his other sentences, and you can see all the paragraph. The further sentence is, the proletarians doesn't have any fatherland, and they should build one. They should build. They should be involved in their nation and to become the majority. So he's doing. The statement is like, this is bad that they don't have fatherland because they are part of their societies. They have no voting rights. It was the 19th century situation. They have no chance to influence the society, and this is bad. So his real idea is not that this is good, don't have any fatherland, be cosmopolitan. He's saying, let's build it. And nobody's telling from the new left this. Just read it in the manifesto, all this paragraph. So again, this is just a demagogy from the left, new left. This is not the truth. Marx was talking, of course he was internationalist. But what does it mean, internationalism? Internationalism doesn't mean cosmopolitanism. Internationalism means internationalism. Like we have nations, and we are trying to cooperate as a nations. This is internationalism. So we have the working class in Austria, we have the working class in Germany, we have the working class in Slovakia, we are cooperating. We have the common interest, so we are trying to help each other. Not just like putting away the borders and to be one melting pot. This is not the idea of Karl Marx. Yes, maybe one day in communism he said that there will be no borders. Communism was not like the plan for the next Tuesday. It was a plan for the new century or new millennium, but not the next Tuesday. So we need to be realistic. Our only chance to control the capitalism is the national space. And Karl Marx was talking also about, in the 19th century, about the situation of Irish national question. Does he say that, oh, Irish, you are so stupid, nationalistic and fascist, something that you are trying to have the autonomy? No, he said, oh, British workers, you should support your Irish comrades to become independent state. How can he say that? He was internationalist. you can see that Marx was not like the idea of this postmodern left. He was real involved in this national emancipation movement, which was progressive. The same question was for Poland. Poland was at the time the part of the Russia Empire, this Tsarist empire. He was trying to defend the right of the Polish nationality to become a state. How can this was possible if he was so big defender of the idea that the workers have no fatherland? So if the workers have no fatherland, why they need Poland's Polish state? So in the end, Marx was really not the postmodern John Lennon. Really, he was a real realist and based on the historical reality of nation, and it was the case also in the 19th century. Then there was a big battle in the Second International, and you know that the biggest thinker of the Second International were Karl Kautsky, Rosa Luxemburg, Vladimir Lenin, and Eduard Bernstein. But the issue of nation was strongest presented in the writings of Lenin and Luxemburg. It was a big battle, big clash between these radical leftists. They both were radical leftists, and in the end they both were communists. Lenin and Luxemburg, you know the situation. First World War, till the 1914, everybody was talking about internationalism and working class has no fatherland, but in one day SPD became the biggest nationalist party in Germany, starting with war, and all the others in France and Spain started with the same position, like defending their national interests. And Lenin was, Rosa Luxemburg was like disgusted, and he said, oh, they just betrayed our socialist ideals. And she said that this was really bad and don't analyze it, this is just betrayal. But Lenin was more clever man in this. He said, oh, let's speak about this. We can see that our Russian people are feeling, or not only the Russian people, but also Estonian, Lithuanian, Ukrainian, because it was an empire. They are feeling some national togetherness. So let's speak about this. He was analyzing this historically. And he has the analysis, which is very influential till now. He come up with the idea that the nationalism has three, but in general two main sources. I'm analyzing this in more deeper, but I will be much simple now. The first type of nationalism is regressive. It is the nationalism of empires. I mean, if you are, I will use the argument from the today world. If you are the American in the United States, and you are defending the American interest in the world as an empire, you are regressive nationalist. Yes, you are chauvinist. You are imperialist. It's good. It's bad. Of course, because every left-wing man, every socialist or every communist, as Lenin said, must to defend these working people and to these weaker people. But if you are Indian in America, or if you are some African nation under the French or British rule, colonial rule, in the first half of 20th century, is it regressive to stand against this imperialism on the nationalistic basis? No, he was defending that. It is absolutely all right if Ukrainians in Tsarist Russia is against Tsar. It's absolutely all right if Finnish in the Tsarist Russia are against the Tsar. So he said the progressive idea is to have the national self-determination for every nation. He was the first. He was before Woodrow Wilson said it. And Rosa Luxemburg said, oh, this is absolutely not good, this is bourgeois, this is capitalism. I think that Lenin was true in this, and Rosa Luxemburg's ideas in this were more connected to her self as a Jewish, because he didn't feel at home in Poland, he didn't feel at home in Germany. I can understand it, but in the end, this is not the case for the majority of the population in Poland, not the case for the majority of the population of Russia and Germany. They feel some connection to their nation or to their state. Lenin was true, I think, and his idea was very influential, and today I think this is the main influence over the many countries in the development world. Or if you are saying Lenin in Africa today or in Asia, they will celebrate him. Still, in Slovakia, you are saying this and you're just going to jail. But you will say the same in Ghana. Oh, of course, Vladimir Lenin. Everybody in Africa, everybody in Asia became the Leninist because he was the anti-imperialist thinker for them. I think the nationalism can be progressive. This is the main idea. Slovakia is a good example. Austria as well. We are small nations. We are not the empires. We are not the big France or big Germany or big America with dozens of millions of people with the interest in the global economy and with the multinationals. They don't need the idea of nation because their imperialist interests are best served if there are no other nations. It was the typical discussion between Marx and Lafargue. You remember Lafargue. Lafargue was his, I don't know the English expression, nephew. I think he was the husband of his daughter from France. And Lafargue was saying like this, oh, internationalism, working class has no fatherland. And Marx said, oh, you're just saying that because you are friends and you want to just occupy the other country. And it was really like this. This can be very likely misused, this idea of anti-nationalism, because the powerful superpowers needs this. If you have no nations, you can just occupy this country without any refusal. So that's why I'm saying that alter-globalist, I mean the left-wing liberals, globalizers, not like Macron, there are also the more progressive globalizers inside our radical left movement, in the Linke, in other really progressive movements. I think, and I'm arguing in my book that they are doing the useful ideas for the multinational capital. This is my idea. Useful ideas is a Lenin term. It's not like pejorative. It's not like trying to disqualify them. But really, they are serving the interest of the multinationals and superpowers. And this is something which shouldn't be titled left wing. It is not left wing. In reality, it's very much helping the global capitalism, and this is not good. So this is my idea in my book. I'm trying to say it very, very shortly. I will end, and then will be probably the discussion with the three scenarios, which are from my point of view, good starters for debate about the deglobalization. Because what I offer is deglobalization. It means like overturn globalization. This is the left position. Like to become back to the social national state or to this democratic, real democratic regional bodies based on this internationalism, not on this supranationalism. And I'm basing my ideas, or I'm following the ideas of Dani Rodrik. He's the first who I'm trying to follow. Dani Rodrik, I was saying that he is the Harvard professor from America, Turkish born. He is defending this after-war Bretton Woods system. Bretton Woods system of the world economy was based on the right of any national economy to control their capital, to control their economy and social compromises. Typical Keynesian state, like was Austria in times of Bruno Kreisky, like was Sweden in times of Tage Erlander or of Palme, like was the reality of the Western Europe in the afterwar period. But also of us as well. I mean, Czechoslovakia, socialist country, in different position, but still was sovereign in this world economy. This was the Bretton Woods system that managed the world economy. It was not like the world of protectionist North Koreas. The nations were making the trade. It was very liberalized. But if there was a big interest of the nation, for example, you have very, very bad industry in this kind of, for example, producing the steel. You just cannot have the Chinese industry because they will just occupy you. So you need to help them, and you need some tariffs. You really need it. And it's progressive. You just cannot say that every protectionism is bad. It's not. United States and Germany and China today are empires and big economic powers because they were protectionists before. the liberalized economy, liberalized world economy is useful, especially for the countries which are the most powerful. It was in the 19th century Great Britain, in the 20th century it's the United States, but it's not in the interest of the weak. If you are San Salvador or country Guatemala, you cannot be like have the same competitiveness like the American, multinationals. If some Pepsi Cola is going to go to Cambodia, probably for their prices they will just occupy or they will colonial domination in this country. If you have some drink producing in Cambodia, you just cannot be so effective like Coca-Cola. So sometimes you need to protect your producers and your national interest. So Bretton Woods system. Daniel Rodrik is offering some real concrete proposal as regards today's world. So he's not saying like we can come back just to return, but also in today's world you can change many things which can be more closer to this Bretton Woods system, because the biggest problem is this WTO, this World Trade Organization. This idea is also typical for the second thinker I'm following in, and it's Walden Bello. He's a Philippine economist and sociologist. He's talking about the deglobalization itself. We need to deglobalize. We need to be more oriented not on the world economy, but our production should be more oriented towards local needs and local economy. He's saying this also from the environmentalist position. Like it's impossible like that you will produce something in the Philippines, it must travel thousands and thousands of miles to the kitchen of Austria or Germany. For the nature, it is devastating. For everything is devastating. Why we should be like this? So the world economy should be, or the economy should be more localized, more producing. And if this is the case, there is also the possibility of regulation of national economy to support more cooperatives, support more redistribution, more social enterprises. And this is his idea of more local socialism. And the third thinker I'm following is Marxist. He's from Egypt, Samir Amin. Samir Amin is talking about delinking. This is his concept of delinking, and this is exactly the same. There are some differences, and I'm trying to explain them in my book, but in a sense, it's the same. Delink from this multinational and world economy. It's the only possibility. You cannot be just dependent on this. Slovakia, I don't know, maybe in many ways Austria, became just the vassal state for the multinationals and big superpowers. We are just part of the German and French market. We are really good in that we have cheaper labor power. This is our competitive advantage, and this is something which cannot be the future of the country. It was the same in 19th century. From the point of view of, I don't know, from Kenya, it was great to be the part of colonial system of Great Britain. They were cheap, and Great Britain was dominating them. There is no big difference between this point of view and the European Union in many senses. We are talking, for example, in Slovakia now that I don't know if you have this new article of Thomas Piketty, the French economist. He is talking about the Central European countries exactly. He's saying that okay, everybody's talking like the European funds are so beneficial to the Central Europe and they are so ungrateful and so on. And he's saying, you have this sum of money from the Euro funds coming to Slovakia. And he's using this example of Slovakia, Poland, and other countries. And then you take the figure how many of capital or of investments or this money are coming out of Slovakia from the mother companies, from the sister companies to the mother companies of the multinationals. And you will see that this business model is much more beneficial for these countries of the source, of this Germany, of the France, and others. And they are just exploiting these countries like colonies. If these countries like Slovakia has their own national corporations and own national business and industry, like it was before, they would be much more richer, and their money would stay at home. It would create employment and more national base for prosperity. Because now we are just dependent. In a crisis, it will be just cut, and you are just alone in this global crisis. It was the problem of Greece a few years ago. So that's why I think that we should rethink also the discussion about the European Union, but especially we should follow these interests of the working class people in our countries, and these people are more communitarian and should be more nation-based from the economic point of view, also from the cultural point of view than the left-wing liberals from the Stockholm and Amsterdam think. For Slovakian discuss, this is absolutely common sense. I'm sure that for the Brussels and Amsterdam and London thinking, it's not a common sense. Always I'm in the West, I'm just arguing and quarreling with my comrades because I'm trying to invite them to Slovakia. Let's go to this Prešov, or let's go to this our towns and villages. I'll explain to our people from villages that multiculturalism is the greatest idea and will solve every problem. I was in the United Nations in New York last week, talking about the global compact for migration. It was like the summit of the globalizers, especially from the West. You know, the countries from Africa, Asia they don't feel it the same, but they are. I feel that they are dependent so much on these countries of the West and of the North. I would say this connection. They are just afraid to saying something different. I said something different. I just stand up. I said, "Oh, don't be silly. You are talking about migration like it was the biggest thing on the world. But these people from Africa and Asia are not migrating because they love it. They are migrating because there are wars, poverty, inequality, ecological devastation in their countries, and this devastation is because of you, the countries of North, because you are making these wars and these inequalities, this poverty, and also, after that, you know, British delegation was coming to our. We have now the president of this General Assembly is from Slovakia. Our minister, Mr. Lajčák. He said after 2 hours, he said, the British delegation was talking about your speech. Scandalous! This is horrible. You just cannot say it. You just cannot say the truth because they are just offended that you are just criticizing their model of globalization. It's this model of globalization is based on the interests of the superpowers of the North and of the multinationals based in the superpowers in the North. This is the story. This is the game. I think the best theory on this is Immanuel Wallerstein's theory about that the world economy is divided between the center, semi-periphery, and periphery. Central, it's United States, Great Britain, France, Germany, Japan, and I think it's all. Then you have semi-periphery, the countries like Greece, even Austria, Slovakia, Poland, Saudi Arabia, Israel, maybe Mexico, and others. And then you have periphery, it's the poor countries in Africa, Asia, and so on. You need this division. The bad thing is that the countries in the semi-periphery, like we are very dependent on the center, but also the many countries of the periphery are dependent on the countries of semi-periphery. In the end, it creates the atmosphere of the biggest xenophobia and racism of the workers in our countries. This is a structural situation. You just cannot change this. This is absolutely logical because the people are trying to defend their interests against the people from the periphery, but they are in the subordinated position towards the center. And Wallerstein is analyzing this very, very correctly. He's saying, how can you blame the people from this point of view that they are like this when you have this world economy which is structurally in this position? You need to change the world economy to become more different. And if you are left liberal are talking about the values, I'm not talking about the structural position. You just cannot blame the people, for example, in Slovakia, that they are more xenophobic than the people in other countries, or in Poland or in Hungary. It's our structural position. And I don't mean that xenophobia should be the term which is like the bad word. It's a normal word. In Slovakia, not to be so big fan of multiculturalism It's not like bad world. Why? Is it somewhere written that we need to be melting pot? I don't know. We need to defend our collective identity, not because we are just fascists and we don't like other nationalities. Not. We are just building our community. Is it bad? I don't think that this is something which should be questioned, especially for the young countries, young nations. If you are building your community, building your way of life, this is something which should be bad. Is it against anybody? No. Slovakia was never conquering anybody, any nation. We were no in wars, no in the imperialist wars. It was the countries which are now blaming us that we are the bad guys. The France, the Great Britain, the Americans. We are the bad guys, you know. So they are just liquidating Iraq, Syria, Libya, Palestine, Yugoslavia. All the last 3 decades, they are just devastating the world. Then the migrants are coming. We are saying that, okay, so take them. Either they want to go to your country, not to our. Oh, you are so bad on them. You are the racist and the xenophobic. This is the ridiculous. And the people feel it's like this in Slovakia. I think in Slovakia, it's 94% of people are refusing the quota of migrants. This is like, I think even the Communist Party has this support in the 50s. Everybody. I don't know, yes, I know, all the people in media love the idea of quotas, but I think it's always like this, you have the editorials of medias, it's like maybe 100 people, of all the medias, of course, and against them are all the population. But they are just writing their ideology, their liberal ideology of multiculturalism, and the people are just saying that, oh, medias, who will write it, who would read it, it's ridiculous. And now, what is very funny, in this situation, there is also the rise of the far-right parties. And left-wing liberals are just admiring, like, how it is possible. They are still writing their beautiful, dreaming articles. Nobody is believing this. Nobody trusts them anymore. And they are just admiring how it is possible that they believe in alternative news. Because they don't trust you, because you were blaming them, you were labeling them fascists, you were labeling them racist, you never wanted to understand them. And now they are just admiring why they vote for fascists, real fascists and far right. Because they real vote for real fascists. In Slovakia, I don't know how it is in Austria. In Slovakia, we have a real neo-Nazi party. And this neo-Nazi party has now maybe 8 or 9% of voters. I'm sure that maybe 2 or 3% are real neo-Nazis. And the rest are the people who are frustrated because they just hate this liberal hegemony. They are not fascists, they are not neo-Nazis. I think if we are more successful, in the end they have the left-wing instincts and they would vote for some communist or some Marxist or some socialist party. Because they just hate this capitalism and this neoliberal mainstreaming. And they are not liberals. You just cannot blame that they are fascists, they are not. They are proud on their country, but to be proud on your country, it was also Tage Erlander's ideology, and I don't think that Tage Erlander was fascist. It was one of the most important Swedish social democrat. From today's perspective, if you are talking with the new left people, I'm sure that Tage Erlander would be a fascist for them.
Yeah.
Absolutely for sure. And maybe Bill Clinton or Tony Blair, left wing, or Karl Marx of 20th century. This is absurd. For me, the left-wing thinking is about the economy, about the interests of the working class, about social revolution or social radicalism or this kind. Not about the LGBT rights, liberal rights and human rights. Yes, it can be important. I'm not blaming their human rights. Of course, I think that every left-wing movement should be based on some protection of some rights and so on, especially social rights. But this kind of thinking cannot eat the socialist project. You cannot reduce socialism to liberalism. And this is against the point of my book. Socialism is socialism. It's not a social liberalism. So I will end it now because I can continue, but I don't want because I really like discussion more and hope it will be some. So thank you for that you listened to me so long, and I'm looking forward to discussion. Thank you. Great,
thanks a lot for your lecture. And I immediately connect to the last point because I think that's the most important difference inside the left. What's different in Eastern countries, that you have this consensus that the most important point are the social, economic topics and issues, and not this cultural identity. And we have the problem in Austria and in the Western countries that those people, those new left, they have such a big hegemony in the discussion, in the media and so on, that we are not even able about to speak about that and to struggle about that. So against that. So I think that is one of the biggest differences. I think in Slovakia, if you speak with some communists, or also in Czech Republic, I know some communists there in Czech Republic, they also don't like this style of multiculturalism and melting pot, and also all this liberal so-called human rights and so on. Yeah, and I think that would be next point of discussion.
Well, you are true. This is the problem for the Western societies, that you are in different shape, but in a sense, it's becoming in Slovakia and in Central European countries the same. Because if you are in the grassroots politics, you are talking with the people and you are following them. You are like I'm saying, you are very communitarian. You are against this liberal left and so on. But if you want to have a career in the European Union and in these European-based backgrounds, but even in the national government, because national governments are so much connected to this Europe today that it's impossible to be in the summits and forums of Europe. You know, you can be a rebel like me, like stand up and saying something which then the British and even Austrian delegations usually are criticizing me, and German also when talking about Russia and so on, like screaming on me that I'm a Russian agent because I'm criticizing America as well. You know, and then this is a possible if you want to be a rebel, but you have no career. But if you want to have a career, I have many friends in my comrades in my country, which will tell me in a pub in the night when nobody's listening, "Oh, you're absolutely true," and I think that you are true. And then they are saying, "But you know, I have family and I need to be different in this forums." Then I'm listening to them in this Brussels and saying, "Oh, human rights and Europe and like you know." 30 years ago, the same people were talking the same shit about the Soviet Union. Now they're talking about the same shit about the European Union. Just the only one different world. Before it was Soviet Union. Now it's completely the same. Completely the same. Even I would say it more provocatively. Czechoslovakia was the sovereign country during the times of Soviet Union. Now we have not even not this. We are just part of this union. Before we were not a part of the Soviet Union. This was maybe Lithuania or Ukraine, but we were a sovereign country. Now we are the part of the European Union, so we're not really to kill our identity at all. This is not the way for our people. People don't want this. Maybe we have the difference also in that we are so young nation. We are really building the nation. You need to build a nation. You need to build a country, the state. This is not like for sure. It's not identity is really historically questioned. We just started to exist as a national state in 1993, and in 10 years we were in the European Union. In other 10 years we are in the globalized world. Everybody's talking about multiculturalism and so on. So people feel threatened, and this is, I think, the biggest issue of European Union now. The people, the working class people especially, are feeling threatened by globalization, and the left-wing people are just too arrogant. Many left-wing liberals in the West, they just ignore them. Like Macron today in France. So Macron won the elections like 50 plus 1 voice against Le Pen and against Mélenchon. Because in the first round it was like this. Like 23% for Mélenchon, 24% for Le Pen. Together it's like almost 50. And against was Macron. And now Macron is like so big winner, spreading his globalizing neoliberal ideas. He has no mandate of half of the French society. But too arrogant doing this. The same is every other country. in the end it can be a big clash, because the people the working class people, the people who are not the winners of the globalization, the people we should represent as the left-wingers, these people are frustrated more and more, and it can be a big we will see. I don't want to have any shock in the system, but it can happen. Brexit is one good example. It was typical voters for labor, for the older traditional labor. I'm talking with the people from labor. It was the people from Liverpool, from Sheffield, from these northern areas. It was the working class people voting against the European Union. I think it's the same also in Austria, that the people who are in the rural areas, who are working class, they probably have no devotion for this liberal concept of multiculturalism like it is in the metropolis of London, Paris or Stockholm. I respect when the Stockholm politician is talking about this multicultural and LGBT issues, if his voters or her voters are curious about this. Okay, if it is successful, well, let's do it. But why doesn't he or she respect that in Slovakia we are different? In Slovakia if you are talking about this, you are just killing your political career, because nobody wants to listen to this. We are going to these factories, talking to the workers. You just cannot take your flag of LGBT movement, because they will just take this flag and just kill you. Well, this is impossible. And imagine Philippines. I was in the Philippines last year, Duterte. Duterte is very charismatic and very popular in Philippines. Every working man in Philippines loves Duterte. He's also very tough and very incorrect in many ways. His manners are really, for European, a little bit over. But probably I wouldn't be in favor of his type of politics in Sweden or in Slovakia or in Austria. But why should we say to Philippines not to love him? He's, for Philippines, accurate. I don't want to be like imperialist, like saying everybody, you should be like me. We are the top of the civilization, like we, the Western liberals, and everybody should behave like us. I want to respect other cultures. Chinese are different, Russians are different, Slovakians are different in many ways. Let's respect it. We don't want to be always, everybody should be like Stockholm NGOs. No, we need to be ourselves, and we should respect each other. This is our idea, I think, of left wing, always was. Internationalist, national ways to socialism, respectful. Remember Cuba. Che Guevara was saying his big motto, which was also in his speech in the United Nations, Patria o muerte, the fatherland or death. Fascist. He was fascist, in fact, because he was talking about fatherland. For our great left liberals in Stockholm and Amsterdam, he must be fascist. Even Karl Marx was maybe fascist in some case, because he was talking about Jews very rudely. Immanuel Kant is the icon of the liberal left. Immanuel Kant was, in 19th century, he wrote the book Anthropology, which is not very much translated. He was talking about Negroes, like the lesser race, like the white race is the best, and so on. Sometimes I'm provocatively quoting to the left liberals, and this is really Kant. So even Kant was racist. They cannot understand history. They cannot understand region, geography, nothing. Just they're one utopia. They have some abstraction. They just follow it. They're like Jehovists. They are more like Jehovists than like real socialists. I'm not like this.
Thanks. Some statements or questions?
I would like to make two comments and one criticism. But in general, as part of this committee, I feel very close to your exposition. First thing on Keynesianism, because I believe all of us, we want to use Keynesianism, and it's the next step to make. But we should not, this is not a criticism, but we should not forget that Keynesianism was a reaction also by the elites, because this impact of social revolution of the Soviet Union produced the Second World War with ultra-liberal politics, and then they reacted with Keynesianism to avoid social revolution. So it was a kind of reform from above also with pressure from below. And if you quote Roderick, he believes too much in gradual change. I believe today Keynesianism needs a revolution. This is the difference, because these elites are not threatened by social revolution. This is gone. No? So this is the big difference. And this is the second thing I would like to mention, because the big question is why this left liberalism is so pervasive, so deeply penetrated. And I think the only possible explanation is a big historical explanation, that these elites who are no more threatened by socialism or social revolution, Soviet Union, they absorb leftist culture because it's no more a danger. Now you can make war against Yugoslavia being internationalist. Before you made war against Yugoslavia being fascist. It's a big difference. So you have the full integration of left culture into the elites. And this makes things very difficult for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this does not mean that we need to continue, but we have this enemy which is much more intelligent as before. My criticism is not what you said about community and common. In general, I can agree, but the notion of homogeneity, I would be very cautious about this, because community does not need homogeneity. And look, for example, let's say the most advanced form of anti-imperialist integration ever reached was Yugoslavia. And the strong thing was that this Yugoslavia did not presuppose homogeneity. With homogeneity, you would have split it. The capability of building community, not imposing homogeneity, is a big advantage. And look to the societies in general, but Western societies, you cannot ask for homogeneity. If you do this, you split them. So take Lenin, you start with Lenin, put it to the Western societies, you need to make community, project of nation, taking inhomogeneity as a precondition.
I totally agree with you, and I don't think that we need to defend the ethnical homogeneity. Of course not. I was rather talking about this kind of homogeneity. Yes, the Swedish example was homogenic in this ethnic way, but it was just a coincidence. Well, I don't think it is our goal. But the truth is that if we are talking about immigration, we have a right to talk also about our way of life, and I'm talking about homogeneity in this. If there is the question like, do we want in Slovakia or in Austria to have, for example, half of the population of other culture? This is not a realistic question, maybe in a few years, but just hypothesis. Would you like to have 50% of your population to be from Syria or from Arab world or from Muslim? Do you think that it would be the same in Austria like it is today? Do you have the right to protect your collective identity like it is now? And do you have the right to protect this kind of homogeneity? I'm talking about this. Is it xenophobic or racist to control migration? Michael Walzer, liberal thinker or communitarian, but very much involved in this liberal tradition from New York. He's saying every community has the right to control the immigration. You have the right to control immigration. You cannot just say to your man, you cannot just escape our community, our country. This is over. But you have the right to control the immigration, and every country in every historical period were doing this. There must be a kind of collective identity you can protect because you are the member of this community, and the democracy and this common life cannot have just the chaotic form. You have some building of. So this is my idea of homogeneity, not the ethnic one like everybody should be German like in the Third Reich. Not. But kind of cultural identity, I don't think that it must be like overthrown because of what? I don't know why it is so important to have this immigration in the country. This doesn't mean again that you just stop every immigrant coming to your country. It must be some regulation. I don't know how it is in Austria. Probably you have some regulation on this as well. I don't know. Hopefully, because.
But in our circle, it's consensus that we are not against controlling migration, because controlling migration is also important in this, I think, on the labor market, for example. So it's also from the left perspective, very important question. So we are not against controlling migration, but we think that building up a nation state and what is very important to aim our goals is not based on ethnicity.
Yeah, of course.
That's very important.
Well, there are two kinds of nationalism in the European thinking, I think. One is this based on Rousseau and the civic nationalism, like the France is typical example. I'm in favor of this kind. Like, if you are a citizen, it doesn't mean that you need to be ethnically French. There is the second one, which is based on this Fichte and all these German authors, which this is very popular also in Central Europe, in Slovakia, Poland. It's more based on this, not ethnic, but cultural togetherness. Like, we are all the same language, same culture, same history, and so on. Yes, this is very typical in Slovakia for thinking. I'm in favor more in this French and this Rousseau one, but still I wouldn't say that every cultural nationalism must be bad. Can be progressive in some senses. For example, Palestinian. In many ways, I think it is progressive to be, and Palestinians are talking about their identity, their culture, their language. They are not talking about the Rousseau civil nationalism. They are talking about this cultural nationalism. Should be the same. But notwithstanding, I'm just telling that when I'm talking about this homogeneity, I'm talking that the citizens of the country in some democratic community have the right of controlling who will be the citizen of the country. This is just my idea.
Just migration, if you want to control economy, the workforce is maybe the most important element of economy, because it's humans who do the work. So control of workforce movement is decisive to develop an economy. So we do agree on this. But this is not necessarily linked to identity politics. Nation is also identity politics. But as you see across Europe, you have this, the social question is drowned in identity politics. And we need to deconstruct this identity clash, which is being constructed. And doing this is not an easy thing to do this, but in societies which has a history of colonialism, a history of bringing people from the periphery, like France, but also here, they brought people here, and they are part of society. So you need to take this into account if you construct community and identity. And I believe it's necessary to do this because, as you said before, it's not only the social contract as a cautious and cognitive thing, but it's also something which is connected to feeling. But still, also the other side is playing with identity. So this is a complicated field to enter where we need to be very intelligent to play our cards.
Yes, of course. Well, I believe that it again depends on the country where you are, or on the region, on the history.
Yeah.
You just cannot have the same expectation from countries like Poland or Estonia and the country like France, with their experience. Of course, France was the colonial empire. For centuries, they were bringing the people from Africa. The same from Great Britain, from other countries. Americans are the nation, people of immigrants. This is the difference than Poland, Estonia, or Hungary. And you cannot just expect from the people the same values or same dedication to this idea of multicultural.
Absolutely.
So it needs maybe different historical period. or needs more time. Maybe in 20 years we were talking about this, and Slovakia, for example, or Poland will be much more open in many ways. Maybe not. But it depends on this country, on this history, on this cultural development. Chinese are very, very closed. Are they fascists? No, it's different culture. For example, I was analyzing in my book the question of democracy in Botswana, in Africa. It was the big dream of these globalizers, like to bring every country in the world the typical Western type of democracy. So they bring to Botswana this two-party system of America. This is the biggest democracy, so let's do that. Like Botswana, the same. And like elections, two parties, and all this American stuff. It was like frustration in Botswana because the people, they were not get used to this pluralism. They always had this one party, and inside this party was a big discussion, like very much involvement, participation, much more democracy. The leaders were coming to the villages were discussing the things. In the end, they were just deciding on this communal, collective view. It was very much participating democracy. But after this change, it stopped to be democratic at all. It was like corrupted systems of two cliques, like it is in America as well. And it was like killing the democracy. So they came back to one party. Or they have the pluralist party system still, but it is still one party and the second is just the satellite. Can you blame them? They have a different history, different communal, typical African type of thinking, more communal, more about solidarity, more participating. They don't need these American experiments or these liberal, pluralistic, democratic Western types. And this is again the same with this notion of this migration. If you have country with history, culture, which is very, very specific, you can't just change it because you have some liberal vision, some abstraction of human rights. You need to respect their development. This is, I think, Marxist position, and I would prefer this kind of, but not. You are very true. The first must be economical thinking and not this just this ethnic or this cultural based. Not, of course. But if you have some country, you need to respect that some countries are more oriented towards cultural nationalism than to this civic nationalism. And this is the Central European case. Poland, let's go to Poland. You will never meet anybody, just Polish people, Catholic people, and Rusophobe people. It's everybody like this. Maybe one day it will be different. Especially in the countries with the big cities, this is different. We have big cities. In big cities, there is this bourgeois, multiculturalist, very open-minded culture. This is middle-class culture. In Slovakia, we don't have big cities. In Poland, there are few as well. In Hungary, it's just Budapest. And usually, the liberal parties and this kind of liberal left parties are concentrated in the cities. In the rural part areas, there are usually conservative parties or the communitarian left-wing parties. It can be a case. And in Central Europe now, for example, the working people in Poland are voting for peace. And the working people in Hungary are voting for Orban. Because the alternative is to vote for the left wing, which is in reality like liberal party. And they feel it like this. You remember Gyurcsány, you remember all these Soros-based parties which was also socialist. What was socialism this?
But that's important thing because Smer party is different and is.
No, Smer party is more conservative, more communitarian. And it's the only reason why in Slovakia people vote for the social democracy is that it is not Western type social democracy. If it was, it would be like 4 or 5% of support.
It was in the past SDL.
Yes, SDL, but even SDL was in many senses communitarian. But then these leaders of this party became the party of government, and it was the process I said before, like careers, European forums, and started to be big Europeans and big, liberals. But the truth is that always the grassroots of the left-wing movement in Slovakia was the communitarian one. You cannot just be a liberal. There are just so few liberals that I can introduce you, all of them to you because there are so few in Slovakia. So maybe in this sense we are in a better situation that what you are thinking is the common sense in Slovakia. But we have this hegemony in media. Everybody is blaming us that you are the betrayal of the left wing, of this Amsterdam left wing, and or maybe the sociologist from Czech Republic, Jan Keller. He's the great sociologist and philosopher and thinker, and I am very big friend with him. He in this migration crisis, when we were realistic, we were not against Muslims, we were not against Arab people, we were not against the people who needs deserves our help. But we were realistic. The people in Slovakia and Czech Republic were very against this mass immigration, and they felt the threats on this and so on. We were just following this. Oh, and this liberal left-wing intellectuals, you are fascist, you are xenophobe. It was like in your country that this labeling, this absolutely trying not to cover any difference in the opinions. Yes, it's not good. And for example, Miloš Zeman, the Czech president, in many ways, really, I don't like his Islamophobia, but still, in many ways, he's the authentic social democrat of defending the Scandinavian social democracy in economy, defending and very much criticizing European Union, and his beautiful rhetoric. I really like him as a politician. I said it.
Yes, I feel it a little bit, but isn't it the case that socio-economically he's like the others? Or is there a difference?
He's talking left wing, but he's president. He cannot change the things. So in the end, he's talking really social democratically. He's defending the cooperatives, the social redistribution, the progressive tax system, the collective rights of the people. He is really like Bruno Kreisky or like Olof Palme in social economical issues. But in cultural issues, again, and that's why they blame that he's far right. He's talking like our nation has a right to choose who is going to migrate here or not. He's talking about the right of people in the European Union. He's sometimes Eurosceptic and so on. So he's far right for the left. I was in the Linke seminar a few months ago. I was talking like, oh, Miloš Zeman is good. I'm happy that he won over this Mr. Drahoži is total neoliberal.
Me too.
And the people from the Linke like, oh, Zeman, he's fascist, he's neo-Nazi, I was like, have you ever listened to him? No, I don't understand him, but it was written in Guardian. I don't think that this is right thing. I remember Mr. Kwaśniewski, you remember, Polish president. He was talking one day, we were in one seminar, he stand up and said, oh, this is the big rise of this far-right nationalism, and the people like Le Pen, like Wilders, like Fico, like Orban. I said, what do you say? Fico? Your big friend Fico from Slovakia? Because they are friends. Oh, I didn't mean like it was just written in Guardian. Oh,
yeah. Who was saying this?
Fico, our prime minister. He said that he is one of these far-right guys, far-right with left.
You were quoting who?
Kwaśniewski.
Okay, yeah.
And then he was continuing with all these globalizing liberal things like Macron. He's typical left-wing people in Poland, and he's one of the reasons why the Polish left is now out of the parliament.
Well, he was responsible to lead Poland into the NATO pact. He was responsible.
Exactly.
So.
And I'm sorry for the left-wing movement in these countries like Poland and Hungary, but it's their fault. And also in Czech Republic now they are decreasing. The party in Czech Republic I am very much involved because they are still our brother nation. Partly the truth is that the Social Democratic Party still doesn't know what to do because they have the elites which are very like Western type, liberal, and the grassroots is totally, completely communitarian. And very few people can represent this grassroots. Zeman is one of them, and that's why they have internal clash, and people know this, and that's why they are so weakening. Communist Party is very, very conservative. I mean, communitarian. It's old type, fashioned Communist Party. But the problem of Communist Party is not this. The problem of Communist Party is rather that they are like typical apparatchiks of the former regime.
They are not able to voice this sentiment.
Yes, they're just boring. They are just like Brezhnev, like the same, rhetorics. People are very non-interested in this, and this is their problem.
But they also supported Seiner.
Yeah, of course.
Communist Party. So
I have many comrades there. I have really, but they just cannot attract people because they're boring. They get used to this Soviet regime. Like you don't have to be a big rhetor. You just to be apparatchik, very, very, decent and very with this everything. Not Che Guevara. You need to be Brezhnev. And they are in this type of politics in democracy absolutely
You lose.
but there's still, I think, third or fourth strong party.
Yeah, but now they have 7%. They had before they had 20.
Yeah.
So because the people who were voted for this kind of Brezhnevian politics are dying.
Yeah.
And the young people don't want to see this old man talking about Brezhnev and Stalin. They want some right-wing politics, but not this kind.
Yeah.
So this is a problem of Communist Party, not that they are like bad in their ideology.
A question. You were talking about you have a real neo-Nazi party in Slovakia.
Yeah.
What is the social basement of their community, and are they supported by the elites actually? By the elites actually. By the elites, by the upper class.
Oh, elites, yeah, I understand now. Well, no, not exactly. They are a party which is based on, I would say, three membership groups, I would say. First is real neo-Nazi, like former skinheads from the streets, which were like beating anarchists and punks, and this is one. And this is the usual deputy member of parliament in Slovak parliament is like this. With skinhead and like very bodyguard and going. This is really.
These are workers.
Wait, he's just explaining three components. Let him finish the three components, and then you decide.
I'm not sure. But from the class point, they are not workers. They are usually the son of entrepreneurs and businessmen, and one is teacher. I don't think that there is any worker from the class point, but maybe there is also workers. There are maybe also workers, but this is the members of parliament. Then you have this intellectual group, which is very much attracted still by the history of Slovak fascist state, so-called Ludaks or neo-Ludaks. It cannot be translated because it is the party of President Tiso during the Hitlerian times. Was the puppet state for the Hitler, and this Tiso, he was the priest, and his party was called Popular Party, Ludová strana, and they were called Ludáci, populars or something like populars maybe. Yeah. So now these populars, these neo-populars, who are not neo-Nazis, like defending the racism of doctrinal type of these Hitlerian times. Defending more like corporativism of Mussolini type of this neo-fascist ideas, but connected with this Klero idea. I mean, it's Klero-fascism. It's like
Austrian fascism.
Probably yes, probably yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah, like the Austrian one.
Dollfuss.
Yeah, Dollfuss. Yeah, exactly. Even this is more related to the Catholic Church maybe, but it's only difference. So the Klero-fascism, this is the second component, and the third component are the people who are not either Nazis, either fascists or Klero-fascists. They are just frustrated. They are just, I think, the typical workers, working men in some villages or in some valleys, unemployed and very angry on capitalism and so on. And they are voting for this because they are the only anti-system party in the Slovakia. So there are three components. It's not like the party of elites at all. Probably they would be in the end supported by elites like in Hitlerian times. Like Hitler didn't start with the elites, but they just take him and just started to finance him in some time. He was successful. In the start he was trying to be the proletarian or the National Socialist Party. So it was not starting with the elites. Even this what was the name, Ram was anti-capitalist in many senses in this essay. So it started like party which was rather, I would say, low bourgeois or middle classes which are lower. The same is true for the neo-Nazi party in Slovakia. They are not the party of elites or of the rich man. But in the end, rich men would really be really helpful because their program is very capitalist. Their program is like to have the flat tax, to have the discipline in the workplace, to have the corporate system, and if there are some left-wing or trade unions, they need to be diminished. Typical fascist program, corporatist program. So I think this is the dream. It would be dreamy for the rich man, to have the discipline working force. So this is the idea. But for now, you just cannot support them, the Nazi party, if you are a businessman. If you would support them, the liberal media would blame you, and in the end, you are just out of the anything. But if they are just rising, and if there is a situation very similar to these territories, I'm sure that they would just cooperate with this rich man, like Hitler.
This part is this Kotleber.
This is this party, Kotleber. Yeah.
I'm very curious about elections in your country, because here in Austria, one of the main problems that I see as a political activist is that the media coverage and the political tagging of political issues themselves, regardless be it left or right or something, is always connotated in a certain very defined space, thematically, I mean. That means that from the thematic point of view, if you try to start a campaign, an election campaign, with the position that you want an exit, that you really intend to leave to stop the membership of being in the European Union, then regardless where your activists come from, what background they might have, I mean, I'm really talking about the individual scale here, you won't get any media coverage, and I can talk about a couple of examples where even the public media sort of sabotaged interviews by sending people who then would say some stupid things, and the cameraman would point to them, and this was shown on public broadcasting, among a couple of other things. So I would be very curious about the real idea of democracy, where you can raise a topic and say, I would like people to vote about it, because this is actually, from my point of view as a Democrat, the basis of the political formulation of anything. If I cannot get my message out, then we are ending in a sort of a democratic simulation, where basically all the media coverage is centered around a couple of things and some side topics, like we have now about smoking and things like that, or animal protection or whatever, and everything else that is connected to the basic functions of currency politics, of taxation politics, everything that is connected to the membership of the European Union is an absolute straight no-go. It's really sacrosanct, and you are every party who goes into government is turned upside down. Like we have the example from the FPÖ, the right party. They abandoned every topic they had in their election campaign, like CETA and TTIP. This is all gone. Nobody talks about it, not even their own representatives. They are not even asked by the media reporters why they are changed position.
This is the reality. I was
just talking about smoking.
Yeah, I even wrote the book about this based on this Noam Chomsky's ideas. Maybe you know Noam Chomsky is telling exactly the same. This is the system which is just pretending the democratic pluralism. It's like you have some mainstream differences, but still it's mainstream. But if you have some different opinion, you have no chance to say it. It was he has a good example. One in the year, the mainstream televisions will call somebody who has different opinions like him. He was in television, and he was opposing American war in Vietnam, but you know, it was at the time. In all the medias was like, we are just saving the poor Vietnamese from the evil communists, and it was this typical mainstream idea. Every day, daily, every hour, every television, every newspaper was talking like, great, America is saving the Vietnamese from communism. And then he said something different, and he's just interpreting this. It must be like some, for typical American, like, oh, he's totally full, And he has 1 minute for this to explain it. It's not enough. If you can say in 1 minute that America is great, you just need no arguments more. You just say it and everybody believes it because he listen to it every day in the year. But if you say something which is alternative, you need some arguments. But you have the same time, 1 minute. It's impossible. So usually the far right, far left, or other politicians in some debates, and they are not very often in these debates. In Slovakia, possibility maybe one in half year. They just seems like real fools, like fools for typical, you know, indoctrinated man in Slovakia or in Austria. Oh, what is he talking? But everybody knows that America is great, you know. So this is one of the systematic restrictions against the pluralism and against democracy. But in the end, probably you know this difference between totalitarianism and democracy. I mean, the Soviet Empire was totalitarianism, according to this division, and the democratic West was always democratic, and everybody was talking what he wants. In the reality, you have just some system which have the anti-system elements. The Soviet system has the anti-system elements, all these capitalist democratic forces. So he just reduced the right to speak. Do you think it's different in this capitalist democratic world? It has just different systemic powers which he is reducing. It's very, very similar. Every system has its own discourse, and which is out of this discourse is eliminating. Maybe the Soviet system was doing this more aggressive or more punishing. This system is doing it more softly, but still the effect is the same. Every system is defending their core principles. And the core principles are, as we are saying, European Union must be good. All these issues of the liberal globalization must be good. And if there is somebody who is questioning this, he must look like a fool. This is. I think we need to live with this. I could open the Marxist attitudes in Slovakia, in post-communist countries. You know, again, Marxism in our country is different than in your country. You say that Marx was okay, meaning that you are saying that the biggest monster in the world, who killed millions of people, who is very typical, he's like Pol Pot in typical Slovak people after this brainwashing after 20 years. Marx, Lenin, Pol Pot, the same. Marx is Stalin. You know, this is typical. And now I'm saying that no, it is not like this. I'm saying it very, very often because I'm still in 6 years in politics, very often in the TV and in the discussion. And I'm saying that, and they are terrified from me because I'm saying this very often, and the people are starting to question their dogmas. Like, oh, really? It's true. No, not everybody. For majority, still I'm fool because I'm saying something different. But for many people who are dissatisfied with this capitalism and with, oh, it's true. The Marxism was not. You know, if you have a chance, but you need to be in politics, you need to be in parliament, you need to be in some ways to get to this plenary, and then you have a chance. But you need to have also the courage, and to have the, you know, you have to know that you will have no real career in this system. Yes, you can be very, very provocative in some years, but in the end they will just kill you.
Well,
kill you, but your career.
You're a member of parliament.
Yeah, but it was just coincidence because I was cooperating with Social Democrats, of course, and they knew that I am very radical, but they still put me on 86th place in Slovak Parliament. We have 150, so it was impossible to be elected, you know. Suddenly I was elected. So because we were so successful in this 2012, I mean, Smer Social Democracy, we have 44%. Nobody expected this. So when it became, everybody was like, you are there, oh my God. So, but then they know that I am well educated, I can speak English, it's not reality for many deputies in the Slovak Parliament. So they made me the chair of the European Affairs. And then I'm in the European forums talking with my radical views. but I am also very successful in these TV shows and so on. So these parties often needs me because they have no others to blame in day-to-day politics. Because it's not only about these big topics of Marxism. Yeah. I'm talking about the daily politics. This is again my advice, not just to talk, because I have many communist friends and comrades and extremists, I would say, with their language, who are talking always about some big visions, big issues, like, but not about the daily politics. Yeah. But the people are very interested in these walking newspapers. Oh, this politician said about this politician this, and what's your opinion? And typical communist, oh, I don't mind. I mind only the Antonio Gramsci idea of hegemony. Let's talk about this. The people are not interested in this Antonio Gramsci idea of hegemony. So you need to be more grassroots. I mean, more oriented towards daily problems of the people, and this can work. But you cannot win over media. You cannot. You can just provoke. But this is our role now. We are in the system where they have hegemony. I think we will be very useful in the period where the crisis will come. This is our role, to be prepared for the crisis. And it will come. Capitalism will always come with some crisis. And in the time, somebody must be prepared to say, oh, people, you know, this is in ruins. Let's talk about alternatives. I have this one. And this is our only way to postpone. Otherwise, we have no chance today with this empire to combat, to be successful. But it has sense.
Thank you a lot.
Yeah.
I think we should close the debate now.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
And please send us a preview of your book in English. So we'll publish that on our website.
Okay.
And so people from Austria can also buy it, or you will send them those books.
Great. Okay.
Where can it be bought?
It will be published by Peter Lang Publishers. It's multinational. Oh, I shouldn't say it. It's based in
international.
International, yeah. It's based in Switzerland, and but it has also maybe in Austria and Germany. It has some book distribution. So it will be probably in December. I hope so, because my book was given to the publishing house in Slovakia in August last year, and even now it's March, and still it was written. It's written and it's on the table like more than half year. So I'm just waiting and still. So it will be published finally this month in Slovak language. So if everything is okay in English language, it will be in December, but it can be again like waiting. I don't know. So I will let you know, and then I can come also to you, but also
because then we will organize something in a bigger frame.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes, and we have also if you have a debate with several people, then things become very different, and we are about to organize things.
We can organize some left liberal, for example.
Yeah, it will be very interesting. Yeah, it will be very interesting, and I love to quarrel with the left liberals. This is my new sense of life.
So